Before I actually completely lose my mind talking about Tobias Harris, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you are so inclined. We do player breakdowns, team breakdowns, react to NBA news, talk about big picture stuff. With well over 50 games being played already this season, we could start talking about awards now. At least on this channel, I will start talking about awards. And we talk about a bunch of other stuff. But let's talk about number 12 in Philadelphia. So if you are a Sixer fan or are for some reason not a Sixer fan and just a watcher of the Philadelphia 76ers, you watched Tobias Harris throw up an absolute stinker last night against the Celtics. In what is one of many stinkers in the last 3 weeks, Tobias Harris yesterday had 13 points and 2 rebounds. That's it. Oh, I forgot to mention a nice, cool 5 of 19 shooting from the field and 2 of 7 from 3. And, of course, passed up many other open shots because that's what Tobias Harris has done over the 5 years. 5 seasons he has been a Philadelphia 76er. And this isn't so much a video about Tobias Harris throwing up another stinker, and we will talk about that. I wanted to talk about the broader, bigger picture of Tobias Harris and his time here in Philadelphia, because it is increasingly apparent that this was one of the worst mistakes of the Joel Embiid era, and I can do a video documentary on every mistake the Sixers have made after they brought in Adam Silver to force out Sam Hinkie, the number of assets that were burned, one too many trades, putting weird players around Joel Embiid that don't really fit, and basically dishing out over $70 million to offensive players that don't fit properly around Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. But let's get to Tobias Harris and just focus on that, because that video would be an hour and a half long if I did all the post-Sam Hinkie mistakes. This is the worst stretch of Tobias Harris's career that I have seen, and I don't think it's particularly close. This goes beyond his normal, shooting slump, not passing the ball well, not defending well. This is something different. You know how when you watch players and you can just see, and you don't want to play psychologist, but you could just see when a player is in his own head. Tobias Harris has been that for the Sixers the last 5 years. You can tell when there's stretches of the season where he loses confidence and doesn't want to shoot, doesn't want to get to his normal spots, and just doesn't know what to do out there. This is something worse. He has turtled so far, and Derek Bodner of the PHLY Sixers podcast said this yesterday, but he has turtled in a way that I have never seen Tobias Harris turtle before. Just the lack of confidence, the lack of an outside shot, the lack of knowing where to be on the court, fumbling the ball, even fumbling simple outlet passes like he did last night against the Celtics. And it's gotten to the point now where Nick Nurse just has to bench him or give him a way shorter leash. There are just more impactful players on this Sixers roster. A Sixers roster, by the way, that is about as bad as the Washington Wizards net rating-wise without Joel Embiid on the court, and they have been for the last, basically since Embiid has been injured. But over Tobias's last 14 games, 15 points a game, 6 rebounds a game, 3.5 assists per game, on 43% shooting and 23.9% from 3 on over 3 attempts per game. Putrid. And I know the 15, 6, and 3 sounds nice. It's a problem when Tobias Harris is 1, making $40 million, and 2, the film doesn't necessarily back up those numbers. I see someone who is lost on offense, doesn't know when to shoot open threes, won't shoot open threes, which has been an ongoing thing for me for 5 years. He just doesn't shoot enough threes. Now he's not making threes. He's making terrible reads. Unless it's a basic one-pass three-point shot, he's not getting an assist. Those 3.5 assists are fooling you if you just take it at face value. Whenever he's in the pick and roll and trying to get downhill, he can't finish. Remember earlier in the year when it looked like Tobias might have been unlocked by Nick Nurse, he was finishing downhill, and he's not even doing that anymore. And just through pockets of this season, when Joel Embiid has been out before this recent meniscus tear. Like earlier this year in Boston, when the Hospital Sixers nearly pulled out a victory against the Celtics, and Tobias Harris was fucking awful in that game. 14 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds on 6 of 16 shooting, and 1 of 1 from 3. And that is the other kicker with Tobias Harris that I mentioned earlier. This guy just won't shoot threes. Refuses to do it. He would rather meander into the mid-post, get to his spot, and basically be I don't even want to say Diet Coke Carmelo Anthony, because honestly, Carmelo Anthony has been slandered too much and is kind of used as a facsimile for guys who are actually empty calorie scorers and basically ball stoppers. But Tobias Harris has spots he likes to operate in, and he won't change out of that. He's tried to change over the years and just won't. And man, just that 5-year contract, that was one of the worst decisions of the Embiid era. One, Elton Brand trading for Tobias Harris after having already traded for Jimmy Butler, and what I thought at the time was maybe one trade too many, but I thought Tobias Harris was a good player with the Clippers, so I was like, okay, sure, but then you give him that massive 5-year, $180 million contract, and you're expecting more out of him. You're expecting him to play like a near-max player, and for some reason, especially with the national media, he's just skated under that spotlight. He has been absolutely awful. And at best, like in the 2020-21 season when Tobias Harris was actually, solid, we clap our hands because it's like, oh, thank God Tobias isn't, stopping the ball. He's actually being decisive. Over the years, we have just been asking Tobias to basically be a player we would actually allocate $35+ million to. Shoot threes, be a defensive stopper on the wing, make quick decisions off the bounce. And Tobias doesn't do any of that, hasn't done any of that. And when you pair him with, at the time, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and you're asking him to be the third scorer, you're just going to run into problems. And then, when your best players go down, usually a team expects their $35+ million a year player to step up. And he just hasn't. In the playoffs, he has also disappeared outside of the 2020-21 playoffs, the one where the Sixers collapsed against the Hawks. And you just can't have that out of your $35 million a year player. And that was one of the biggest mistakes of the entire Embiid post-Sam Hinkie era. You just sink $40 million of your cap to a player who you're constantly asking to change his role, by the way, because his style doesn't necessarily fit the style of the team's best players, which is problematic there because usually a $40 million player is malleable, can do a lot of different things. And on the surface, when you look at the stat line, because I see a lot of national people or people on the outside who don't watch every Sixers game but then tune into a game like the one Tobias had against the Utah Jazz on TNT and be like, why are Sixer fans so hard on Tobias? He seems like a really good player and a good third option. Just seems like a scapegoat for, Joel Embiid. No, actually watch Sixer games. I beg of you. Tobias Harris, he's a solid player, but he's not worth $40 million a year. And I guess that is also the issue here. Tobias has, in large part, been the same player. But now, with Embiid out, With this roster being more fitting around Embiid than ever before, that means when Embiid is out, the team is probably going to look worse. That's why the last few years, when Embiid has been out, the Sixers have played better because they had star power to fall back on with, Ben Simmons than James Harden. And I don't even want to call Ben Simmons a star. He was kind of a star with the Sixers, but not really. But at least you had a play style to fall back on. Here it's just, you expect your $40 million a year player to step up, and he just won't and can't. And that really fucks up your team building process. The fact that we have not traded Tobias Harris this entire time, the fact that he has actually lived out his 5-year, $180 million contract and is going to be a free agent this summer, that's just killer for the Sixers. It has killed them in a bad way. It has fucked up their team building process. In Tobias' spot, you would love to have a 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" wing who can rebound, who can shoot, who can make some plays off the dribble. And like I said, on the box score, it looks like it. But in the game, I see somebody who won't attack the ball when going for a rebound, who can't even make the simplest read out of a pick and roll. You can't really run offensive action through Tobias Harris unless it's a post up in the mid post area, which is his favorite spot to operate. But again, that's ball stopping and takes up half the fucking shot clock to set up. Oh, and he won't defend unless it's a post up because he's only good for using his size on the block to defend people. Oh, he also won't dive for loose balls. For some reason, he can't bend at the hips and squat down and get a loose ball or dive on the floor for a loose ball. Hasn't taken a charge. Can you believe this? And I really thought this stat was a typo when I first saw it. I think it was last year. I've seen it a bunch of this season, but I saw it last year too. Tobias Harris, during his entire tenure as a Philadelphia 76er, has not taken one single charge. Not one. Not one. I've seen Joel Embiid take more charges than Tobias Harris. I would sure have loved to have allocated that money somewhere else. But it is what it is at this point. I don't know when Tobias is going to break out of the slump. And even if he does break out of the slump and plays well for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then people will get back on Sixer fans for not liking Tobias Harris, I just know that another slump around the corner is coming, and he's just not reliable. But regardless, this Sixer team is sliding, and they wasted a Tyrese Maxey masterclass yesterday on both ends of the court because their $40 million a year player, or excuse me, let me get the number right, on average, $36 million a year, according to Spot Track, because, of course, the contract was escalating throughout the year, so I'm using averages. That player just hasn't lived up to his contract and is not as good as his contract. And that's just the reality of it.